By the beginning of the 1880s, Adams County was beginning to settle down, changing from rambunctiousness to gentility. The rapid growth continued, but it was a more orderly development, with institutions being established, solid foundations being laid. It was exciting to be sure, but less frenzied. Dorothy Cree, 1972.
The first period of major growth that is documented by the Central Hastings Historic District is the Victorian Period, which lasted from 1880 until 1890. In contrast to the 1870s boomtown growth, this decade represented controlled and more refined development. Due to the railroads, this was a time of immense prosperity and population growth that has not been seen since. The prosperity was displayed in the architecture. It was ornate, excessive, and many techniques were used to avoid flat, plain-looking surfaces. After the fire of 1879, the downtown needed to be rebuilt. City leaders were determined to build with more permanency than the previous period. They passed an ordinance which required that all new commercial construction be of fireproof materials. This marked the beginning of the brickyards in Hastings, which lasted for the next 60 years. With 4 brickyards, Hastings at one time produced 70% of all brick in Nebraska and 100% of the paving brick used in the state. Most of the brick makers were the Germans from Russia. This was a unique group of Germans who, in the 1760s, migrated from Germany to Russia and then to America beginning in the 1870s. They established 2 settlements in the southern area of town and contributed much to the growth of Hastings. Another fireproof construction material was stone from Colorado. The Farrell block was designed by Hastings architect C.C. Rittenhouse for Irish immigrant Thomas Farrell in 1880. This building housed many businesses and served as the Adams County Courthouse from 1880 until 1890, after Hastings won a 5-year county seat war with Juniata, which had been the site of Adams County government since 1871. This dispute ended with a heated election which declared Hastings the new county seat. That same day, Kurt Alexander, who was good friends with Buffalo Bill, and his right-hand man Harry Rogers Smith rode quickly and quietly to Juniata to load up all the county records and bring them back to Hastings before Juniata could appeal the decision again.
Hastings, with her rapid growth, soon took from Juniata the county seat. So with wrath in our hearts and tears in our eyes, we watched it disappear to the east, and poor Juniata was no more the metropolis of Adams County. Susan Cole, 1915.
In addition to the Farrell block in McCormick Hall, architect C.C. Rittenhouse also designed the Visitation Academy, now Crozier Park, and the State Asylum for the Incurably Insane, known now as the Hastings Regional Center. In 1883, Rittenhouse oversaw construction of the Nebraska Loan and Trust Building on 2nd Street for J.B. Hartwell, for whom Hartwell Park is named. Today, Hartwell Park Historic District is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In 1907, the Clark Buchanan Company replaced the Nebraska Loan and Trust with J.N. Clark as its president. J.N. Clark lived in the Central Hastings Historic District in an 1890 Victorian, built for him at 1135 North Lincoln. Most homes constructed during the Victorian period had small, ornate porches. After 1900, it became fashionable to replace those porches with classical or craftsman-style ones. In 2005, the current owners of the Clark House removed a 1928 porch and replaced it with the one similar to the original. They found the 1890s Victorian paired entry doors under the porch, placed them on the house, and put the 1928 doors back under the new porch for future owners to find. J.N. Clark's son Will and his friend Rollin Kirby left Hastings in 1898 to study art in New York and Paris. Will went on to become the cover illustrator for American Boy magazine, which later became Boy's Life. He also designed the Broncos logo for Hastings College in 1911. Rollin Kirby grew up at the other end of the district at 741 North Lincoln. This house was built in 1886 for Rollin's father, George Kirby, who owned the Kirby Day Shoe Company. Rollin went on to become the first person to win the Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartoons in 1922, and then won again in 1925 and 1929. As a New York cartoonist, Rollin Kirby helped shape public opinion during the Great War, the women's suffrage movement, World War II, and Prohibition. He created the cartoon character Mr. Dry, which became the international symbol for anti-prohibition forces in the 1920s. Today you can see Victorian hitching posts dotting the avenue that these two boys grew up on. These posts secured the horses that were used as sources of transportation during the Victorian period. Horses powered the streetcars that were established to transport people around town. Beginning in 1887 and lasting until 1892, there were two rival streetcar companies, the Hastings Improvement Company and the Citizens Street Railway. In the beginning, whichever company laid their tracks first claimed that street or avenue. This process developed into the streetcar wars, with one company working all day to lay their tracks and the rival company coming in during the night to tear up the other one's tracks and lay their own. Armed guards were posted and the war ended when a judge decided the routes for each company. The records of the brick Victorian home at 1119 North Denver indicate that a streetcar was to pass by its front door every 30 minutes. The house was built in 1888 for Alexander and Sarah Murray. Alexander Murray was the owner of Hastings' first swimming pool, which was built in 1887 at 5th and Kansas. The pool, where men and women were to swim at separate times, was called the natatorium. Although there was plenty of water for the city pool, there wasn't enough for the farmers. The period of plenty ended with a drought-induced depression which began in 1893. The situation became so desperate that city leaders formed a rain-making committee. When this failed to resolve the drought, many left Hastings in the 1890s, including architect C.C. Rittenhouse and community leader J.B. Hartwell. Many of their large Victorian homes were abandoned. As bad as it was, the 1890s depression did bring about better farming methods and serious consideration of widespread irrigation. Today there are still Victorian structures scattered throughout the downtown and historic district, connecting us to the 1880s, when Hastings was beginning to mature and prosper.